Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome back to You Got Questions, We Got Answers, episode 12. Coming up next. All right, before we go any further, I keep getting these messages, and I really need to fix this, but the opening you just saw where I'm twisting the throttle here and this quadrant was moving around, that doesn't happen anymore. I fixed it at least a couple years ago, but I keep using that old opening, and so everybody keeps sending me messages every so often saying, you need to fix that, dummy, and I'm like, well, actually I did a long time ago, but I keep doing these reminders and people keep sending me messages, so I'm just a reminder, hey, I fixed it, so please stop messaging me about it. Okay, so I'm here with my ridiculous hair, now 5 months without a haircut. I'm gonna see how long I can get it to go, but lots of questions from people in the last month. A ton of questions on YouTube and quite a few coming in on the GoldwingDocs site as well. Some really great questions. As always, way more questions than I have time to answer here on YouTube. I'm trying to pick the most generic ones that apply to everybody. If you have a question that you really want answered and you need it answered now, I suggest go to GoldwingDocs, the GoldwingDocs forum. I'll put a link to it down below. And you can post it there, and any of our 90,000 members will be more than happy to help you out. First question today is from Bodan. Has anybody had the experience of a new, in quotes, defective tire? I replaced my front tire and noticed a 30-mile-per-hour wobble. It was odd since the old tire didn't do it. I thought I noticed that when the tire was spinning on the balance stand, the tire didn't seem to be uniform. Short answer is yes. Tire manufacturers aren't perfect. Sometimes tires come out and they cool differently. Sometimes they were molded improperly. Sometimes they were stored improperly. In any case, you can definitely get a tire that is not quite symmetrical or quite in round. Most often what I'm seeing is you'll notice where the tread actually seems to move as you spin the tire. That could definitely be the cause of this, and the fact that you're saying it doesn't seem uniform can speak to that. It could also be the mounting of the tire. On tubeless tires like we have on our bikes, the seal that keeps the air inside the tire is on the inner part of the tire itself. There's a piece of rubber that's got metal inside it to keep its shape, and it gets pushed up by air pressure against the rim of the tire. And that's extremely tight on there, and that's what keeps the tire from sliding around. And that's the reason you have to have these fancy tire machines to get the tires on and off, because it takes a bit of work to actually get that thing on there. Now what happens when that tire is put on is that it actually slides out and seats against the rim of the tire. You have to put some lubricant in there so that it slides out properly. If the tire doesn't have proper amount of lube, and sometimes that's done because you're putting beads in. You don't want globs of lube in there that's gonna glop up the beads, the balancing beads. But sometimes what will happen is that bead will actually roll under a bit as it's sliding out, and it kind of like pulls the tire in a bit against the bead, and it might not happen all the way around the tire. So what you have is a tire that on part of the tire, it actually is pulled in a bit. Effectively, the diameter of the tire is a little bit smaller on one side, and you'll notice the tread kind of wobbles from side to side. So if you are seeing this kind of wobbling, the first thing you want to do is get the wheel up in the air and spin it. And if you see here, I'm spinning my rear tire, and you can see there's a line molded into the tire, and every tire is going to have this. And look at the distance between that line and the rim. As the tire spins, you don't want to see that changing at all. It should be exactly the same distance on both sides of the tire as the tire is spun. The other thing you can do is, again, get the tire up in the air and spin it, and look at the tread. The tread should not move. You should not be seeing the treads kind of swaying from side to side as the tire spins. If you're looking at the side and that line is actually changing distance from the rim as the tire spins, the tire wasn't mounted correctly. If you see the tread actually move from side to side, it might be a defect in the tire. Either way, you got to get fixed. Don't ride it like that. The other thing that can cause a wobble like that is imbalance. And the best thing I can recommend for that is counteract beads or dyna beads, balancing beads. They're ceramic or glass beads you actually put inside the tire, and they dynamically balance the tire. They work okay in cars. They work fantastic on motorcycles. And the thing is, as your tires wear, the beads redistribute themselves inside the tire and adjust to counter that imbalance caused by the wear. So it's almost like you're getting your tires rebalanced every time you go out and ride it. I've been using beads in my motorcycles for over 10 years. They extend your tire life. They work really, really well. I'm going to put a link to the counteract beads that I use in the description below. You can have a look at them. I'll also put a link to the review on the GoldwingDocs website about the counteract beads. All right, next question. From Steven Sendajas. I would like to make a tow bar for hauling my trike, but I was going to make it for the 2 back wheels, so the back wheels will be on the road and the front wheel will be on a rack. Do not do this. Okay, let me repeat. Do not do this. Never, ever, ever tow a Goldwing with the rear wheel on the ground. You'll see these kind of harnesses or trailing or towing rigs where you drive the motorcycle's front wheel up into it and it grabs and holds onto the front wheel, and that goes into the hitch on the tow vehicle. And then the back end of the bike is on the ground and just kind of trails along with the back wheel turning because it's on the ground. Doing this will destroy the transmission in your Goldwing. Let me explain why. Unlike a Harley or other bikes that have a separate engine and a transmission, the engine in a Goldwing is integrated. There's transmission in the bottom half, engine in the top half. They are both lubricated using engine oil. So on a Harley, no big deal. Put the thing in neutral, you drive along, the wheel turns, it turns the transmission. The transmission inside has an integral pump that pumps the transmission lubricant around inside there. Everything's good. Not the case with Goldwings. In Goldwings, the lubrication for the engine and the transmission comes solely from the oil pumps driven by the engine. So if the engine is not running, there is no oil flowing. As you turn the rear wheel, it will turn the drive shaft, which then turns the final output in the transmission. That's got bearings and gears and all kinds of stuff in there that are dependent on lubrication from the engine oil. But there's no engine oil being pumped because the engine's not on. So what you're doing is essentially turning the output portion of the transmission on all its little bearings in there with zero lubrication. If you can imagine driving your car down the road on the highway at 60 miles an hour with no oil in it, how long do you think the engine's gonna last? Same thing goes here. If you're dragging your bike behind your tow vehicle at 60 miles an hour and it's spinning the back end of the transmission at 60 mile an hour speeds, and there's no oil going in there and doing that lubrication, how long do you think your transmission's gonna last? The answer is not very long. So yes, it seems like a really great idea, and for Harley trikes, sure. For Harleys, for other bikes that have a separate engine and transmission, go wild. On a Goldwing, never, ever, ever tow it with the rear wheel on the ground. And a third question from Milkman89. A while back, I installed the Pathfinder LED headlights. I've had those in my 1500 as well. These headlights cause static through my radio. What can I do to get rid of the radio interference? All right, so what happens is you get an LED bulb, which I should have here as a demonstration, but don't. An LED light bulb. So he's talking about Pathfinder LED headlights. Pathfinder actually are really good headlights. In fact, I think that's what's in my bike right now. I've had electrical connection, I've had Kaizen, I'm fairly sure that the headlights are in my bike are actually Pathfinder now. In fact, yes, they are. So the LED lights, they don't run on 12 volts. Well, yes, they do. You put 12 volts into them like the bike runs on 12 volts. But the LEDs themselves, the actual chips that emit the light, do not run on 12 volts. They actually run on a lower voltage. So in order to get those to work, there has to be what's called a DC to DC converter. So it changes the 12 volts DC coming into a different amount of voltage, whatever those LEDs happen to require. In order to do that, it needs a very high frequency switching circuit. I don't want to get too complex or technical, but basically it switches power on and off really quickly, sends it through some capacitors to smooth it, and you end up getting a closed loop voltage regulator. But if you notice, I said high frequency switching. So the headlights draw a fair amount of current, and that's being switched on and off really, really fast at a high frequency, an audio frequency that you could actually hear. What happens is that switching on and off really quickly modulates the input power so much that it actually backs out through the power wires and into the rest of the bike. And when you have something that's sensitive to audio frequency interference, such as your radio, intercom, CB, you can actually hear that interference as a whining noise. And you'll know because if you turn on the headlights, as soon as you turn them on, you'll hear a whining. In fact, on some headlights, if you turn the power on and listen to the headlights, you can actually hear them whine just through the air. Definitely with HID headlights, they have to do it the other way. They need to step up the voltage. So they have a massive DC-DC converter to high voltage, and they make a lot of noise. You can really hear them whining. So how do you fix it? Well, the way I fixed it, because I did have that problem with these headlights on this bike, is by using a ferrite core. So what this is it's ferrite, and it's just a piece of, it's powdered metal kind of, and it's compressed into this donut shape. What it happens is you put a wire through the ferrite core, and it induces magnetism when the pulse starts, and also when it stops. And again, I'm not going to get too technical in this, but what it does is it basically acts as a choke. In fact, this is called a ferrite choke. So it allows straight DC current through with no impediment, but when you start sending back and forth or on and off or any kind of transients through it, it acts by choking or damping those transients. So if I put the headlight here and then this wire goes out to wherever the power is coming from to power the headlights, putting it through a choke like that will actually help reject the interference coming out of the headlight. And you don't, I mean, this will work putting it through like that, but the more times you put it through, the better it's going to work. So if you can, you may even want to do what I did, is I actually extended the wires going to the headlights to make them longer so that I could put it through the choke. Oh, I don't even know how many times. I probably have it 10 or 15 times through, because it actually amplifies the effect the more times you put it through like that. So as you can see, I've put it through this toroid several times, and you just keep doing that around. I'm going to do it a little neater than I've done here, but around and around and around as many times as you can get it through there, and that will definitely help with the noise rejection. Now you want this ferrite core to be as close to the actual source of the noise as possible, so you really want to mount that up in the headlight area, right next to the headlight bulbs, as close as you can. You want not very much wire in between the headlight and the choke itself. You can actually get this type of choke, and I will put a link to this in the description below where you can get chokes like this. They're fairly inexpensive. You can also get a choke like this that has a splittable core. This is for places where you may have wires that you can't disconnect. Or for instance, this ferrite core, if you're not cutting the wires, you're not going to be able to get a connector through there, so you can't thread it through and through and through because the connector itself is too wide. So what you can do is get a core like this one, or a choke like this one. It snaps open, and then you can, because it actually comes apart, you can put the wire through several times and then snap it shut. And that way the wire is through several times, but without having to take the connector off the end, because you didn't actually have to thread the connector through the center of the choke. So that works just as well as the other ferrite choke. It's a little bit easier to do on a wire that's already existing that you're not going to cut. All right, that's 3 questions. I hope that's of some use to you. If you like what you saw, please click like, subscribe, click the little bell, leave a comment down below. What did you like? If you have a question you like answered, leave it in the comments below. And don't forget to check out the GoldwingDocs website. We've got 90,000 friendly Goldwing owners just like you, and they're all friendly, willing to help with any questions or problems you might have. Thanks for watching. And next, oh, God damn it, my hair is driving me nuts. All right, next question.